Our Town KC is brought to you by Video Communication Studios, provider of custom online video education and training. And now, Our Town KC. Hi everybody, and welcome to Our Town KC. My name is Pete Barrett, and today you've got to stick around. We've got a really interesting guest. His name is Gary Jenkins. He has written and produced a documentary about the mafia in Kansas City, and it's called Gangland Wire. Thanks for joining us, Gary.
Thanks, Pete. I'm happy to be here.
So, tell me about your background. How'd you get interested in the Kansas City Mafia?
Well, I was actually a Kansas City Police Department detective in 1970, and up till 80, I was assigned to the Law Enforcement Intelligence Unit. And our primary job was to work the mafia in Kansas City. We followed them around. We worked with the FBI, and so I got to know them intimately. I had some sources that were close to some of the mob guys, and so I knew a lot about them back in those days.
So back in those days, what's the date for what I'm talking about?
Well, I'd say I went to the intelligence unit actually in 1976. I had been around mob guys when I was in patrol, but I didn't go to the intelligence unit until 1976, and I was there until I got promoted in 84, and then I came back as a supervisor in 90 until about 94.
All right, so as somebody who didn't grow up in Kansas City but worked in the news media in Kansas City, I'm aware of the River Key area.
Correct.
And what I've heard is that it was pretty much a bastion of gangland and mafioso activity. Is that true?
Well, it started out being this grassroots development, much like the West Bottoms is today, or the Crossroads. It was no government agencies. The city didn't really do anything to help. They just watched.
It was just like the Wild West.
Right, Wild West. And so this man, Marion Trozzolo, bought up a bunch of those old buildings down there that were not being really used for anything, storage or maybe even vacant, those old brick buildings. And see, that was that around 3rd and Main and Grand and Delaware and Wyandotte. That was all the startings of Kansas City. And those are old government buildings, so there's a lot of old, good, solid brick buildings and really classic, romantic, I'm trying to think of the word, but cool buildings.
Cool,
now they're cool. And
they've become cool.
And they're lofts now. And you have exposed brick walls.
Well,
Mr. Trozzolo realized that this was close to downtown. He was buying the buildings cheap, and he went in and scrapped them up a little bit and fixed up the old wood floors and had some exposed beams, and then he'd rent out space at a really inexpensive rate to art dealers or artists, for example. I knew this one
Sounds
artist.
like the Crossroads now.
Yeah, it is like the Crossroads. And like Philomene Bennett and Lou Merrick are really well-known artists today, and they rented a space down there for $75 a month back in those days. And lived in there part of the time. And so, that was going. It was really going good, and everybody from the suburbs was flogging into the River Key because it became the hip in place to go. There were bars and restaurants and music, and the baby boomers, myself included, were, we were like 25, 26, 27 years old, and singles bars were in then, and it was a fun place to go. But there became some problems because it was so close to the city market. The Italian, Sicilian-based mafia in Kansas City, they all started businesses and were attracted to the city market, to the produce business when they first came here from Italy back at the turn of the century. And they kind of had a proprietary interest, and they hung out down there. They had pieces of businesses down there, and the River Key was right next door. And so some of the mob guys wanted to put bars into the River Key because it was hot. There was so many people coming down there, and there were a bunch of them being relocated from where the Marriott Hotel is.
Where it is now.
12th and Central today, across from the Folly and Barney Alice. So there was a strip of seedy nightclubs, strip bars, and go-go clubs, and they wanted to move down there. And there was a guy named Freddie Bonadonna who had a place called Poor Freddie's, and Freddie knew that it would destroy the family atmosphere of the River Key. And it was a really family, kind of young singles, young urban professionals before the...
So it was at one time considered a family safe place to go.
It was, and it was, it was a lot of fun, like the Crossroads is today, really, and the Power and Light District is today. And so these guys wanted to move their clubs down there, and Freddie, he riled up some of the merchants down there, and they went to some political connections they had and started resisting these new liquor licenses being down there. And they said there was going to be an overcrowding of bars, and Freddie really knew that would bring in a bad element. And so Freddie's dad was a maid guy with the Comisano outfit.
A maid guy.
Yes, he was a maid guy. And Freddie was a square-jawed, honest guy. And always ran a good club and had a lot of friends and was not involved in the life, but his dad was.
Yeah.
But his dad was told by his boss that he needed to influence Fred to get Fred to influence the other business people down there, to their political contacts, to back off of this and let these bars get some liquor licenses down there.
So poor Freddie ends up being
Freddie,
in charge of this effort.
Right.
Doesn't want to be.
Well, David goes to Freddie and he says, "No, Pop, I can't do it." And so David had to go back to his boss, Willie Comisano, also known as Willie the Rat, and say,
that tells you something. Yeah.
He won't do it. And so the story is that Willie the Rat says to David, well, he could get hurt. And David said, if you're going to hurt my son, you got to go through me. And so about a month later, they found David Bonadonna in the trunk of his, was about a 65 green Mustang, about 8th and Wabash, and dead. Yeah. And Freddie went into hiding. There was a large building down there that actually Freddie had a part ownership in, and there was a large insurance policy on it. And Freddie was on the lam. He had a contract out on him, and he closed down his club. And the headlines were starting to hit. After the headline at that time was murder linked to the River Key for his dad, and people were starting to say, I don't know if I want to go down there anymore or not. And then Freddie owned this building, and some people say it was retaliation. Some people say it's an insurance job because he had an insurance policy on it, but it blew up. And it was like a block long from, say, Wyandotte to Central on 4th Street. And you can't tell, it's just parking lot today. Yeah. But it was a block-long building with 2 nightclubs in it and an upstairs, and it blew it up so bad that there wasn't anything left but a hole, but the cellar.
Wow. And it's a parking lot to this day.
It's a parking lot this day, and it freaked people out. Chuck Haddix from Fish Fry, he's in my movie. I talked to him, interviewed him. He was working at a club down there, a restaurant called Victoria Street Station. It was a cool place. The dining cars were made up of old railroad cars that were hooked together. Yeah. And you may have gone down there. And so he was working there and he was closing up. And he said that explosion hit and it rattled those railroad cars and they walked out. It just looked like Beirut, it looked like Lebanon in 1980s. And he said people the next day, they just quit coming in.
So you've done a documentary about this stuff. And you've got audio tapes of this?
And so it's an interesting, the arc of the story is we get into it big time. My unit is assigned to the FBI, and we're following these guys around. We're trying to find out everything we can about them, going to our sources, and the FBI is working their sources. And between the two of us, we find out that they're planning some more murders. There's been a couple other murders that had happened of periphery characters, and they always did it at the Villa. They were planning these murders at the Villa Capri, which is a little club, nothing to do with the Villa Capri on Metcalf.
I
always get that question, and so I want to clarify that. It's a small little cocktail lounge right out of the 50s, and it was a pizza place, and it was an Independence and Prospect, and so the Bureau got the probable cause to put a hidden microphone in there. And what they heard was not planning more murders in Kansas City. What they heard was about bringing money back from Las Vegas, about Teamsters influence, about $5 million debt service, about a guy named Genius was supposed to sell a casino immediately, and they checked out in Las Vegas. They find out, well, Genius is Alan Glick, and he owns 4 casinos, actually, and he'd gotten a $62 million loan from the Teamsters. So it's like, wow, we're into it now. And so
Pandora's box is open.
Right, and so it spins out. Actually, the River Key, that whole investigation just kind of died out. Some of those club owners moved into the River Key area from West 12th Street. They didn't go. They ended up closing down. There was maybe 2 of them. Joe Comisano's, Willie's brother, opened up Cotton Eye Joe's, and another guy opened up a place called Delaware Daddies, and they were kind of go-go strip clubs, and they didn't last a year.
So in producing your documentary, I mean, you're revealing a lot of things that aren't really all that old. I mean, they're like, 30, 40 years
35 years ago, yeah.
Are you worried about your safety?
Oh,
cement overshoes or whatever they said in The Sopranos?
Well, all those guys are dead.
all right, well,
but they do have children around, or grandchildren, and I did have.
Yeah, that's right. The question is, what's going on now?
I was showing it at the Screenland. We did a 2-week run last year, and a guy approached me afterwards, and he was the nephew of one of the main characters that we got on the wires. Because I got audio from all the wiretaps, and so you listen to them talking about how do you skim from Las Vegas, a death threat to a casino owner from a Chicago mobster. So that's all in the movie, and so this guy, Tuffy DeLuna's nephew, and he approached me and he said, here's who I am. And I said, well, interesting. I said, what do you think? And he said, I put a little segment of an audio in there where Tuffy knew he was going to jail as this was starting to unfold on him. And we'd served search warrants. And he tells some of his compadres that, we got to brainwash the old ladies. I'm getting my wife ready now because we're going to do some time. Yeah. And so, interesting little insight into the mob family. And so, how do you deal with that going to jail for a long time? And so he said, I appreciate that you put that in about the families and how it affects families. And I said, well, thank you. And he liked it. So,
so, if somebody wants to learn more about your work, how do they do that?
Well, I have a website, www.ganglandwire.com, and I have clips. I blog about my experiences working the Mafia and about other things I've learned about the Mafia, both here and throughout the United States on that. I have a blog on it. And I'm also, I am developing an app right now. I'm real with it here.
All right.
I may be old, but I'm with it.
He's doing an app. There you go.
I'm making an app in which a person can take a mob tour of Kansas City. You just get your smartphone out and you click on Little Italy, and you click on that, and you'll pull up a screen. It'll show you tell you about the different locations and what happened there. And then I put some little snippets from my movie in there to kind of support what that is. Or if you want to go over and see where the Spiro brothers were shot up at the Virginia Tavern at Admiral, Virginia, you can go over there and learn about that.
So it's all about the past, but you've got a foot in the future. That's great.
Yes,
That's great.
I do.
Gary has an app. So, all right. Well, I wanted to thank you for coming by on the show and telling us all about the history of the Mafia in Kansas City. I think it's fascinating. And again, your website?
www.ganglandwire.com.
Ganglandwire.com.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for watching Our Town KC. My name is Pete Barrett, and we'll see you next time.